Last year didn't get.
Yes,
There
it
was
did.
one year. That was when I went to Mon.
That minute ticks off real slow.
It was
I don't have enough money to be a smile.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, and I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Can I have the roll call, please?
Doing the part play.
No.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, roll call, please.
Scott Murphy,
Here.
Rick Webber, John Moore, absent. Rose Jackson,
Here.
Elizabeth Skinner. Here. Chris Chapman.
Here.
And Susan Letcher.
Okay, we have a quorum, and this is a special meeting of the Town of Bath Council, meeting with our attorney and with the Landmarks Commission and anybody else that is interested in the subjects tonight. We have basically two things on our agenda. It's going to be, we're talking to Mr. Gay for an explanation and discussion on West Virginia Chapter 8, Section 26A pertaining to certificates of appropriateness. And then our second agenda, we'll also be talking with our attorney on exploration of adoption, implementation, enforcement of municipal building codes in the state of West Virginia. So, I just want to make an announcement tonight. If you have questions, let's get it all out in the open, because when we walk out this door tonight, I want this subject to be settled. Okay, that's why I've got Mr. Gay here to explain the situation and everything that's going on. So I will open it up to Mr. Gay, and he can give us some stipulations on some of the things that have been going on.
First of all, I disavow all knowledge of everything that's been going on, because I don't really understand what's been going on.
Okay.
Thank you for that broadly worded endorsement. Well, as everybody knows, we did form a National Register of Historic Places, which went through the SHPO. We have a list of 218 contributing buildings, 3 contributing sites, 6 contributing structures, and 1 continuing object. It consists of the community central business district along the previous listed Berkeley Springs State Park, small industrial area east of downtown, and residential areas surrounding the downtown, which contains several churches and 2 cemeteries. So, also located in the district are the Berkeley Springs Train Depot, T.H.B. Dawson House, the Clarence Hauermel House, the Sloan-Horn Roswell House, and Judge John W. Wright Cottage. We were listed on the National Historic Places in 2009. The ordinance adopting this process did not authorize the issue of a certificate of appropriateness. Okay, there is no such thing unless you all adopted and authorized it. All right. So how do you do that? If you want to have a certificate of appropriateness, wow, here. I've got too many files. So the historic district deals essentially with the exterior architectural features of a building. Just because a building or a district is on the National Register of Historic Places doesn't mean that the owner has no rights or can do anything he wants to with it. Usually you can do almost anything you want to with an historic building or a historic district, unless you're receiving some sort of government funding or assistance, either in rehabbing it or doing something else. Otherwise, within the limits of any other ordinances of the town, you can do basically what you want to. You can tell it tear it down sometimes. You can do, like I said, it doesn't restrict your ownership rights. What the certificate of appropriateness does, it deals with the exterior architectural features, which means features you can see from a public place. If you can't see it from a public street, it's not even considered part of the exterior architectural features. And what that does, it gives the committee control over all aspects of repair, remodeling, whatever you want to do. There has to be a process which you don't have yet. Authorizing the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness, which also trumps any building permit. You can't issue, if you have a certificate of appropriateness, you can't issue a building permit unless you have a certificate of appropriateness. That's a condition preceding to getting a building permit. And it covers repair, remodeling, painting. It deals with exterior features, paints, windows, all kind of stuff. Now, the one county that has that is Jefferson County. They have a certificate of appropriateness. And Susan told me she called the SHPO, and I think there are two counties or two cities in the state that have them, right, Susan?
Well, there's 232 municipalities in the state of West Virginia, 55 counties, and all of those political subdivisions can have historic landmarks commissions and then can have certificates of appropriateness. There are 60 historic landmark commissions in West Virginia, and four of them have certificates of appropriateness. So less than 2% of West Virginia subdivisions that can have them do.
In Jefferson County, the Historic Landmark Commission works in conjunction with the zoning administrator and the zoning and planning commission to review plans for development of any place that's an historic structure. I just did a case last year where we had an historic building, a a couple 100-year-old beautiful old house on the farm that was being developed, part of it. But there was nothing being done to the building. It wasn't being, nothing, I mean, it wasn't even being painted, so it was just gonna stay as it is. And the zoning administrator ruled that they really didn't have any jurisdiction over that because there was nothing gonna be done. And the courts upheld that ruling. But essentially, unless the government is giving you money to do something, or unless you have to get a permit from the government to do something, the jurisdiction over an historic building is still almost entirely vested with the landowner. Okay, so they can submit to it or request some input from the committee, but you really don't give up any rights at that point. When you have a certificate of appropriateness, the first thing about the certificate of appropriateness is that the statute doesn't specify any conditions for membership. It talks about your community. It's talking about membership of the community. I do not think that someone from out of state can be considered part of your community. I think the community refers to the community of Berkeley Springs. Does that include the county? And maybe there's nothing to prevent you from nominating somebody from the county. Can you nominate somebody from Winchester? I guess you could have them on an advisory board, but I don't think they can really serve on the committee. So you didn't have any requirements for that when you adopted this ordinance.
No, we do.
You do?
Yes, you have to be, a certain number have to be within the town residents, and then
Okay, I didn't find that.
the remainder have to be within, from the county itself.
Okay, I didn't see that in the ordinance.
It doesn't
It's in the ordinance.
necessarily have to be a resident of the town or county. It's a resident or property owner. So you could live in Baltimore and own property in Morgan County. And by the way I read the law, as it was amended, I think it was amended in 2016.
Correct.
And I think that's how it went from, I think, 5 to 9 people.
I wasn't aware of that. You know, I really haven't been involved in this process with you all until recently when you asked me questions about it. I knew it was going on because Nancy Harvey's right across the street from my office.
Mhm.
And I talked to Nancy about it. She worked real hard to get this
Mhm.
done. Right. But anyway, so if you do have an ordinance establishing a certificate of appropriateness, then you have to have a majority of the members demonstrate special interest or experience or education, history, architecture, planning, real estate, or law to the extent such persons are available in the community. So that's one of the requirements for the committee. But also in order to do that, you're gonna have to, this is the procedure. In the event that such ordinance or order established in the commission has authorized the commission to issue certificates of appropriateness. This is from 826A1, 6, subsection 6. The local governing body shall hold a public hearing on the proposed designation of the historic property or historic district and any proposed regulations and requirements for the historic district. Notice of the hearing shall be published at least 2 times in the principal newspaper of general circulation within the municipality. County in which the property or properties to be designated are located, and written notice of the hearing shall be mailed by certified mail with signed return receipt required by the commission to all owners and occupants of such properties. All notice shall be published or mailed not less than 10 and more than 20 days prior to the date of the public hearing. Following the public hearing, unless the owner of a proposed property or 50% of the ownership interest in a proposed district objects to such designation or regulations and requirements within 30 days following the public hearing, unless you get these objections, the local body may designate the property as historic, approve and amend rejections, etc. You can do, and you can adopt whatever regulations you have that apply to the owners or occupants of that property. So, and you're also supposed to post a map of the historic district. I've never seen a map of the historic district. Do we have one?
I thought we had one, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have one posted.
There is one, isn't there, Zach?
There's one that exists, but no, I don't think it's publicly anywhere.
Well, that's one of the things you need to do.
Yeah, I have a paper copy of it. I would have brought it if I had known that would have come up.
Yeah, so that's the essence of what you have to do. So, as I read the statute, and I had another issue like this in Charlestown where they were refusing to allow my client to repair a 150-year-old building. It was bigger than my office building, and they were arguing about the color of the paint. But they didn't go through this process of giving the notice to the owner, and therefore they really didn't have jurisdiction. It was a jurisdictional question. So they sort of dropped it, and they agreed on a paint. But, they were holding up the whole reconstruction of the building. They agreed to do all the other things, the architectural features, what they wanted to keep it the same like windows, but the paint, color of the paint.
For us, we've not proposed dictating paint for anybody. We would recommend colors, but we're not going that extreme. People say we don't want to be Alexander, we don't want to be Williamsburg. That's not the direction we think this town needs to go. Paint can always be changed.
Yeah, let me ask something.
So that's all I have to say unless there are questions.
Yes.
It's just statutorily procedure you haven't taken yet. So in order to do that, you'd have to have a proposed regulation or ordinance that told people how you're going to regulate their properties, give them written notice, publish the notice of the hearing in the paper, allow, object. If half the people object to it, then you can't adopt it.
They have the people object or an
The owner.
individual property
Yes.
owner. So
I guess you-
anybody in the community could say, even though they had a historic building, no.
There are no cases construing this particular section, okay? There's no case in West Virginia actually construing that section of the opting out.
Mhm.
So that's how I read it. You can get to opt out, but you have to give notice. And if you don't opt out within 30 days after you've adopted something, then you can't finalize it.
I'm not sure that's how that actually is interpreted. I think that is if you're proposing a single building, not as a district, because you can go around and point to people's homes, but I think as a district, if less than 50% object, the motion carries. I don't think there's an opt-out in that case. That's how I read it, that's how I talked to the historic folks at SHPO about.
Well,
Because that paragraph's a little weird, the way they
Yeah,
place the
it's not
comments in
written
it.
very well. I agree with him. I mean, that's just my interpretation of it. SHPO doesn't really, they're not authorized to issue opinions on this, so. I mean,
Right.
But you have to give notice to everybody.
Right, no, I agree, totally agree
So,
with
I mean,
that.
that's what you have to do to adopt it. Whether you adopt it or not, it's up to you all.
And it says, unless the owner of a proposed property or 50% of the owner's here.
Yeah, you can read it either way. I agree with him. You know, you can argue it's ambiguous, and that means the court has to construe it.
Right.
So, I mean, that's.
So tell us, in our conversations over the years with this, in your experience, would you advise and recommend that the town of Bath go this route with certificates of appropriateness?
Well, I think it would be difficult in that what you're doing is you're turning over at least the repair, the whole, all the properties that are listed, 200 and some properties in the district, to essentially the control of the committee. And I'm not saying there would be bad people or it wouldn't be helpful, but you would be ceding a lot of control over the building. You couldn't even issue a building permit to anybody without their approval.
That isn't how we proposed that. We proposed that we would make a recommendation and the town council could make that final determination. And also, the whole National Historic District does not have to become the district it can be also a town-specific district that is governed by these sorts of requirements. So we can narrow that down, focus down to something, because if we're going out to expand, there's people that never, ever want to do it. I get that. But there's people that are along Main Street and the people that come to visit, there's areas that they expect and they come here because of those reasons. And those are the areas that I think would be beneficial to shrink that down to something that everyone can agree on and say, this is the core area, this is the historic district of Berkeley Springs, this is the economic driver. Let's put some additional protections that the owners are willing to protect that area.
The issue with that right now is the historic district is big.
But it doesn't have to be, Susan. We can, like I said, we can scale that down. If we were to go out and do certificates of appropriateness, we would draw a map that shows this is the area that we propose to be our local district that will be governed by certificates of appropriateness.
Well, it says in 826A7 that the commission shall exercise authority to issue a certificate of appropriateness. What you're saying is that your group or the historic landmark wants to suggest or recommend to council that the state law says that it is within, if we pass this, the commission shall exercise authority to do it. So,
And I'm pretty sure that could be overcome by events. I don't think anyone's going to hold up a town doing certificate of appropriateness by turning that responsibility over to the town council.
Then we go
Well, we
through
can
all
go
the
down that-
hearings and we go through everything that it says here that the commission shall.
No. Why can't the commission make a recommendation? So we've done our due diligence. This is what we believe. We recommend a certificate of appropriateness be issued.
So within the current rules, Dick, if we were to go that route, write an ordinance that says that the landmark commission, will give the recommendations on certificates of appropriateness. And we had like an appeal process that said that if the town council determines that, it wants to overrule that
I think we
certificate,
had-
would we have that room?
I understand your question. We had that question, I think, a year or so ago, or a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I'm running out of the dates. I'm sorry.
2017. Yeah.
But I don't see, the town council's gonna do whatever it wants, and nobody challenges it, it's gonna be okay, for just to be practical about the thing. And what he's suggesting is not unusual, but I don't think this statute, because it says shall, it says the commission, if you appoint a commission to issue certificates of appropriateness, I don't think you can overrule that commission. It doesn't, there's no exception to the shall as a mandatory requirement. If it said may, I mean, you could always have put in an appeal process. I mean, you can build that into your own ordinance, or that doesn't necessarily have to come from this. I mean, depending on what they recommend, if you want to do it, we could design an ordinance.
Then we're at odds with.
We'd be audited with the statute, but I
We'd
mean,
be at odds with the statute, and odds with.
if people didn't want it, I mean, they make kind of fuss at you.
But that's the other thing about why they do these things with the Historic Landmark Commission, because then you all are not held accountable. That you don't have to be the bad guy.
Well,
all-
unfortunately, it would come back to us,
But-
but as a council, I understand what you're saying. You guys are kind of taking and going out and looking at it and saying, okay, we need to, make some suggestions here and bring it before the council. The thing about it is, this council's gonna be the one that's gonna be on the hot seat.
What it says, if you didn't take that response, if you read it exactly the way it's written, then you guys aren't on the hot seat. You're on the hot seat the day it's created, the ordinance is created, but after that, but everyone gets a vote. You know, like, I've heard a lot of these people probably don't even live in town. They're not your constituents when it comes down to it. I mean, how many absentee out of Morgan County landowners are own property within this historic district? There's a good amount.
My main problem is, I don't, you know, my whole thought of the situation is, I don't want to put a burden on people that live here full time and don't have the money to fix something up. I mean, that's the bad thing. I mean, unfortunately, we got out of town people that own properties here that kind of maybe once a year they're here to look at them, and they leave and they don't come back until the following year. Then we got other people who live here full time, and I mean, I know this is all on historical property, but my main concern is I don't want this to, you know, maybe hit somebody where they don't have the money.
We're not asking you to fix anything up.
So-
Correct me
We're only
if
doing it
I'm
if
wrong
someone
on
comes
this,
to
David. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. We adopt this. This is kind of like the ADA corners. If we're not gonna replace a house, if somebody's gonna do anything to the outside infrastructure of their house, windows, roof, architecture, then they don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
That's what I thought.
And I'm saying if we scale that down to the smaller area, I mean, there's nothing to say that the lawyer's house for sale. Someone comes in and wants to put all vinyl windows in there, or do something else crazy like that. There's nothing you can do to prevent that. The Hovermill house is the same way. There's nothing anyone can do to prevent that right now. Is that the right thing to do? Probably not. And we can sit down and talk and show that there's other options available that won't destroy the historic
Can you
district and
do
the fabric.
that? Can you do that without a law? Could you offer your services to?
We do. I
property
write
owners?
letters to everyone who buys a house when I find out, offering our advice. But if the town's not issuing building permits right now, we don't even know what's happening.
I think the bigger issue more than just windows is that, you know, my store, it's so cute and people love it because it's so cute, right? You all see it across the street, but you know, it doesn't totally work out for me the way it is. I would love brick and I would love like 4 stories and I love commercial. Well, there's nothing saying right now, hey, don't do that. Don't take down that Victorian because there's nothing to say so. So there goes the character with one decision. We're just looking to have those conversations and not immediately say, no, you're not to do that. David would come in and say, hey, you probably don't realize it, but let's look at the rag shop instead. This is a commercial structure. Here's how we can make it work for you. Here's a grant that would help you pay for these things. It's really not a you can't do this. It's a hey, we're a resource here for you, and you might not realize it, but you have other options, and we're going to hold your hand through it. And so it's not in any way taking and saying you
But
can't
what you're
do
doing
this.
is not just holding people's hands through this. You know, there is the carrot method and there's the stick method. If we have a law, it's the stick method. And as far as grants, I have friends who have dealt with these grants who would never, ever, ever do it again. It's very difficult, and there's not, the grants are as easy as it may be portrayed in order to get them to move forward with getting money for private property.
And I agree with that. And I'm not saying
It's
we're going to encourage. Here's a resource. That's why, in my understanding, that's why we're here. You know, if
And then if
someone's
the
looking at a
government's
property,
Then if the government's involved more, then you're really held to a standard, really. held.
and you know, that I knew that when we bought this house. We looked at log houses, we looked out in the country, and when we made the decision to purchase this house, we became stewards of the town of Bath. And we decided to say, we own here and we have a stake in this community. I'm gonna work hard to make sure it stays looking historic. I'm gonna work hard to keep that charm that's here. And I think that that's why all of us are on this committee is because we care. And that's what people are drawn to this community with. I mean, look at Shepherdstown and all the others. And that's why we have these things in place. Otherwise, strip malls, commercial buildings, there's nothing to say.
And the problem comes in, as a property owner who has money invested, every penny I have in that house, I look at someone like you and say, thank you, that's fabulous. But on the flip side is that there could be someone else who says, I'm just gonna tear it down, I'm gonna make it a really nice parking pad, and, and then I'm kind of like, so at some point, I guess where we are, and I don't wanna speak for my fellow committee people, but the all or nothing, right now we have nothing. And for us, I don't know that we're all people, you know, we've gotta be in charge and we have to do this. That's why I'm kind of a person who believes there's gotta be a middle ground somewhere. And that's where we've had discussions about, okay, if it's not gonna be the entire town or the entire historic district, what are the areas that specifically we're talking about? So if somebody wants to buy a house on Congress Street up my way, they can't be seen from the areas that, you know, we're
Right,
five
that
point
you're
two or
looking
something,
at.
right?
Right.
And so maybe if I'm somebody who comes and says, I wanna buy a structure to do X, Y, and Z, well, these are the areas that aren't affected by this ordinance that we have. But if you wanna have something on 522 or, you know, Fairfax Street, whatever that ends up being, then yes, we wanna preserve as much as we can of what the town of Bath
Right.
looks like. You know what I'm,
Right.
does that make sense?
I
But as I
understand.
shared with you all, that there are people who are not buying here for the very reason that there's no protections for them, none
Well,
whatsoever.
We've got another problem because the state come in last year and they passed a law that they can come in at any time and tear any structure down that they want and put up a structure. What was that law last year? We wrote all those letters to the governor.
Harper's Ferry.
Harper's Ferry.
Oh.
And that whole situation and the state,
I don't think that's what that says. That's for the development of a recreation.
right, but they can come in the town
Really?
limits if they
Right,
decided.
the precedent has been set. But I
Right,
think it's gonna be harder if you've got a district. I think it's gonna make it a little bit harder for them to come and say, all right, we're gonna tear this down, and you say, no, we're protecting it, why this place?
right.
I mean, that
And
was a
that's-
unique place, but the more you do to protect your stuff yourself, the more likely someone's gonna do to respect that.
I want to say to this thing about the people not buying here because we don't have certificates of appropriateness.
I said there's no
No.
protections.
Yeah.
Protections, whatever. Okay, you know, I deal in property every day and I deal with customers and new people every day, calls every day. They're all from people from Maryland, Baltimore, Glen Burnie, Northern Virginia, New Jersey, New York, getting out because of regulations.
And I'm
money,
saying, I know
and
two
they're-
people personally who talked to me who didn't buy for that reason. So yes, there's examples on both sides. There's no.
Right, we
Yeah,
could go
yeah.
back and forth on that.
Plenty, you know.
Right, we could go back and forth and I understand, but you know, my whole thing is I don't want, you know, I understand people are determined sometimes to buy downtown or whatever because, you know, we don't have any protection, you know, they could come in tomorrow and somebody beside them decides, hey, I don't like the windows that are in my building and I'm done, I'm just gonna take it down, I understand that. But, you know, we need to work also on with the building ordinances as we're going along. We're working on the dilapidated structures and stuff like that. We also need to work in there that they have to, before they can even consider tearing that building down, that they have to come to the town council with a written statement stating, this is why I'm doing this. And then we, you know, the historical society and everything, we look at the building and go from there, and I understand. But I'm just trying to wrap my head around this whole thing because this is, you know, I don't know all about these laws ins and outs, so, but, Barb?
Well, I have a question. If, I assume that the business district is the historical district or pretty much the
No.
entire
Oh, no, no,
business
no.
district.
No, there's houses out of the,
Yes.
down in the business district.
I can run over that real quick if you
Oh,
want.
it goes from.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Zach.
mine's
Yeah.
historic, on
Yeah.
Congress.
Fairfax Street,
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
well,
So
currently,
Zach's gonna tell you.
yeah, so currently the southern end of the historic district is right around where, you know, where, I think it's called Parks House or something, it's right near
Yes.
where, like, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the southernmost point right now. And it goes up, along Martinsburg Road, it stops just sort of
Right.
Viger Street there, so none of the houses on Viger Street, but on Martinsburg Road. And then up Fairfax,
To the turn.
Yes, to the turn. It stops, before that, it stops short, it stops around Pratt Street. I don't think it goes past Pratt Street, in between Route 9 and.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah, yeah, and then north of Fairfax Street, it hardly covers any of North Berkeley at all. I think it stops at Hageman Street.
Goes to the depot.
Zach, but can that historic district as it currently is now be made smaller in order to do this?
Well,
historic
that's what I'm saying,
district?
the town can determine its own boundaries for its
The
own.
reason I'm
district.
asking, just after I met with you guys, just thinking this through. Believe me, if I thought this is not rocket science. If we were to do a historic district from this stoplight at 9 to the other end of 9, run it up to Wilk Street on this side, up to Green Street on that side, which would go right by your house.
Yep,
But then when you get to where it does that crazy turn by the board, end it there and then run it out so that you include, it's now the brewery thing. And you'd include the train depot and that could be the historic district for the town of Bend.
That's what
Okay.
the town decided, yeah.
Can I finish my question? Okay.
Thought you were.
No, I was
Sorry.
told that no, the whole downtown isn't the historic district. I know what the historic district is because we did the survey. We walked around all the buildings that were in the survey. Lower Fairfax Street from Wilkes to Washington is part of the historic district. Or Wilkes to Green Street, or Wilkes to Mercer Street, whatever. When a building burns down, you have an empty lot, you have a couple empty lots, well, there was one there. What is the determining factor for what can be built there? Does that not have to stay in the historic trend?
Well, it's supposed to be, and that depends how you would write it. If you were in Alexandria, they would expect you to almost build a replica.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you have some power over what you would want there in keeping with the surrounding fabric of the neighborhood. You wouldn't want someone putting up a Butler building. That's probably not the answer you would want.
so
But you probably
who,
wouldn't,
who has the
well,
power?
they would work the Historic Landmark Commission, be the one responsible for that.
Okay.
To do the infill piece as well, to just to make sure that fabric stays the same and to avoid becoming a Disneyland. Because that's one thing I'm against. You shouldn't just put things up and make it look like Main Street USA. That's really not the way I don't think it should go. But that's something that could be determined down the road when that happens.
So,
But to answer your question more fully, if you look at the Register of Historic Places, it gives you a description of every place that's located and it includes. You don't have a map. I mean, I think the first thing you ought to do is.
We do have a
order
map, so it's just not here.
we just have to get
I
one,
mean, it ought to be a public map so everybody can see it.
and we can,
You're required by the
they've got-
statute to have a map and have it published. I mean, so theoretically, your ordinance probably isn't any good if you don't have the map published somewhere so the public can see it. But this is, if you get the National Register of Historic Places, it includes, I'm not arguing with them about what they're saying, but it includes a lot of district. It's north and south Fairfax Street, moving east to west, Wilkes, Washington, Mercer, Green, Hagman, Kendall Lane, Pratt Street, Depot, Kent Union, Independence, Congress, Fairfax, Bath, Liberty Market, Warren Streets. Dawson Street, Martinsburg Road, portions of Bath, Liberty Street, between Fairfax and Market Street, as well as Pratt Street, South and East Market are unopened for flooded street terrain. But it's a pretty broad
Yeah.
district, so.
Right.
well,
But it doesn't need to be.
but
No,
if
that's
we,
that is a political decision. I'm a
Right.
lawyer, okay?
right, that's,
I'm not an elected official.
and I understand where they're coming from, and that's
Yeah.
why I wanted you here to,
Within the district that it currently is now,
Oh, absolutely.
I have 7 buildings. By this fall, it says that I wanted to opt out and say, no, I don't want my building to be in the district or be under the rule of certificates of appropriateness, I could do that.
That's arguably you could. That's where the ambiguity comes in the statute. That's how I read it.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, I read it as if I wanted my building out of it, I could say, no, I don't want.
or if 50%.
Or
of
50% of the
buildings-
owners of all these buildings say,
And
no,
they
no, no.
all have to be notified by
By
certified.
Personal service, registered mail, return receipt requested, personally served.
by commissioner.
Because you are altering property rights. It's called due process. It's a very fundamental principle under our democracy, due process, notice and hearing. So anytime you affect property rights or personal liberties, you must have due process. That's why if you're arrested for a crime, they have to take you before a magistrate and establish probable cause. If you don't, they gotta let you go.
Tim has a question for you.
So if it's property owners, I'm a property owner in town. Well, I can't vote in town.
But you get to vote for this. If you're a
So
property owner.
as a property owner, it wouldn't be town resident.
Nope.
Sure.
It applies to the owner of the property,
Yeah.
not the voter. Has nothing to do
Do
with
with the
voting.
voting record of
Right.
the town, it's the property owners.
And occupants have to be notified too,
Or
but they don't get to vote.
Yes,
That's a big-
occupants or owners and occupants, yeah.
Owners
That's
and
big.
occupants, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Renters, I mean, if you have an
Renters, anybody
apartment
lives there,
house,
yeah.
You know, like when you're looking at houses in the country, I looked in several, about a year ago, I started shopping for houses and I looked in subdivisions. And there are bylaws right there. In the one house, I said, absolutely not. I can't have an above ground pool. I knew going into it what the rules were and I knew what the expectations are. And I appreciated that. I knew that the house next door to me wasn't going to put up something to block my river view. I knew what was coming. I think that it's our responsibility as everyone is here because they love the town. We're stewards of this town. And that's what we're looking to do, is we're looking to protect it. And we're looking to say, hey, you know, coming into it, what our expectations are and what you're getting. It's just like having, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just like, you know, getting, when you move into a subdivision saying, please don't do that.
No,
When we
but
moved
you
here,
are-
we knew we were gonna pay more in
Right,
taxes.
but you
Yeah,
also-
you know,
Right.
we knew moving into town that the water, we pay water differently. The
Yep.
trash is through town, the taxes, like
But
you
you-
said, we
you're-
made that choice to be here.
Right, but in the same token, with doing this right now with people that have owned buildings for ages, they didn't know going in, you know what I'm
But that's how it
saying?
always is. I mean, when you do
You
historic.
know, you
if
gotta
ever-
start somewhere, I
Right.
understand, but, you know, I just, you know, people have bought buildings, they didn't know what the expectations was, like she said, I honestly agree with the situation that she said with, you know, they knew down front, these are the covenants of this development. And if you wanna move there, you follow the covenants. You know, if you don't wanna move there, then you find another place to go. So,
You could also consider adopting the state building code, which isn't what we're talking about. That is
That's the first
right,
step.
yeah,
that's the
that's,
first step. You have to
Right.
do that.
and
Well,
that's
I
what
don't-
we're working on now.
I don't think those two things are linked. I
No,
don't think
they're-
you have to do a building code to adopt certificates of appropriateness.
No, you don't, but they don't have any building codes right
Right.
now.
Right, what I'm saying is that it doesn't preclude one from doing the other.
I agree, but if you don't even have a building code, you don't have any fundamental construction standards, or the state standard doesn't apply if you adopt it.
Right, so, yeah, we can't enforce anything, even if you were to go around and say, hey, you know, we think maybe you could maybe do this, or you maybe could do that, or whatever. But we have no way of enforcing anything right now until we get.
But I think that's two different things. Enforcing certificate of appropriateness is not the same as enforcing a building code. It doesn't require the same people.
Correct.
All they need to do, so they're not coming to get a building code. If you have a building that's a contributing structure, and we've agreed to certificate of appropriateness, they come in and they ask the Historic Landmark Commission to review the work they want to do. That's really it. We're not gonna get into the structural aspects or anything like that, where. That's where the building codes come from. Right.
It's
Well,
just,
you have to approve it if you have a certificate of closing before anybody can issue a building permit. So anybody building anything in town or repaired or
they would
remodeling,
have to, as
they would have to
historical
get a
landmarks.
certificate of appropriateness if you adopt that,
Right,
before you can issue a building
building
permit.
permit.
Right. But one doesn't
So
include the
that
other.
means.
I'm just trying to understand the whole thing. I
That's the
mean,
way it works. That's what the statute says, okay?
I'll tell you something else. My husband and I buy property like this, and we have searched Hancock a couple times and really, you know, looked into property and rather in depth. And one of the reasons there are a lot of vacant buildings in Hancock, Maryland, is the extreme amount of regulation to build in Maryland. In Washington County, Maryland seems to have maybe more. I don't know. But there's two sides to that coin that, oh, you've got a lot of regulation, I really like that. Or you've got so much regulation, I can't take the burden of it and I don't want it. So there's very much two sides to this coin, but that's why there's a lot of, that's one of the reasons I would say that it's a big deal in Hancock. And the council would say that, I mean, councilman would say
I have,
that.
not
I have
all
a
of us would
thought to
say
that. As somebody who came from Baltimore and bought a structure here, I was expecting a certain level of rules and
Right.
stuff. And most of the states and areas that you were talking about, you're right, have got a lot of those things. And on the flip side, though, do we want people who are trying to avoid structure and rules to be buying stuff right here? I mean, because you're a local, you're from here, you have a connection here. But would you have wanted me to come down here and buy a property that's historic and then put a 4-story apartment building there and tell you all because I don't have rules. And so, I keep coming back to there has to be, you
There's gotta be
you
a-
don't want that. You really don't
It's
want
gotta be a
that.
scale that's balanced out.
Yes, there's gotta
That's
be a
the
balance.
thing, I mean, I understand, that's got to happen because we all have to live under rules and regulations. I just don't want this to get to be like Rockville or Washington.
That's
Because
not
I'm
fair.
gonna tell you one
Us is a
thing,
protector.
I worked in Rockville
How
and
much
it was
work is
very
being
hard to
done
get a
here,
building
though?
permit for anything.
How often do
So-
windows get replaced here? That's what we go back to. How
Yeah.
onerous is this gonna be on anyone? I mean, it's not. There's not that much work being done here.
Okay, so the impression I got the other evening at the meeting, we talked about the word compromise. I think
Right.
That's what
Yes.
compromise. I have not heard either side say, this is how far I would go. This is what, I haven't heard Historic Landmark say, okay, this is what I give up out of this. This bothers you, we don't have to do it. I haven't heard any of that.
I
So
feel like the word recommendation
I
is
do
like
too.
our key word here. We are not looking, and correct me if I'm wrong, please jump in. We're not looking to say I want to paint my house with polka dots because I love polka dots.
Navy blue.
So cute, or navy blue or purple. The Landmark Commission isn't going to say, now, hands are off, you all are crazy, you can't do that.
Well, they might tell you you're crazy. but
They
they're
might,
not
they're
gonna tell you
not
you're
gonna tell me I
crazy.
can't do it. They might say, here's what's historically appropriate, and Zach's gonna step in with what he's learned at Shepherd. And he looked at my house, he said, hey, did you know blue, I think is what you told me, blue isn't usually used? And hey, cool, we didn't know that, that's something we learned. But guess what, if I wanna paint it with polka dots, I can still do that. But the Landmark Commission stepped in and said, hey, congrats on buying a house here. If you need help or you want some guidance, here's what we're doing. But it's a recommendation.
But what do you,
That-
what do you say when we tell you you can't
I
put
think
on windows?
What, but the
Yeah,
statute says you have to have proposed, regulations or requirements. So, I mean, that's what you're asking.
Right.
To look at, now, we don't want
the
that.
rule is really a pesky thing, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah.
It's really a pesky.
Well, we
thing.
drafted
I know it's boring to
guidelines.
read, and
Which
like
is
that,
Yeah.
but
Back in
sometimes
2017, I think.
you
it
have
was.
to-
I wrote you a letter in 2000.
Yeah, 2017.
That proposal.
And, but I think what we need to do is we need to revisit what was wrote back then. Number one, so that I can understand it, because I'm, like I said, I'm not 100% sold on this right now, but I'm not sold on it. So, but the thing about it is I have to understand more, because I have to look out for everybody in this community, not just, the people coming in to buy property. I have to look out for everybody in this community. And I think what we need to do is we need to get our heads together, me to be able to understand, maybe some other people on council that have questions, to understand exactly and get an agreement with all of us saying, okay, this is what this is what we're gonna do. And we have this agreement between the Landmarks Commission and us, the council and the mayor, saying that, somebody buys a piece of property or they're gonna fix a piece of property up, and we'll go in and kind of make suggestions if the homeowner wants to hear it, or the owner. I mean, they might not even let they might not even entertain you know, but they may or they may not.
So, but to me, that's not enough. Recommending is not enough. And like, you know where I stand on this, I
Well,
think pretty straightforward, and that's fine.
Right,
But I'm not gonna be part of this if that's the decision going forward. And I'm perfectly fine with all that.
so,
But if someone would, let the Star Theater just sold,
right,
what happened? The fact that someone was willing to invest money in a theater in today's environment is pretty amazing. The next person may not do that. That building could be gone tomorrow. There's absolutely nothing you all, that is the gem of town. And there's
Right.
nothing that can be done to protect that
so.
or alter it greatly.
Basically, what you're asking is you want to have the say to go to the homeowner and say, okay, because you kind of said something different a little while ago. We're gonna recommend.
I didn't say that.
Yeah,
I said recommend for paint.
okay,
What I'm
okay.
saying
But
is,
anyway, we're not gonna argue, but what you want to do is you want these set of rules, and for whatever district that we come up with, say the downtown from Union Street to Fairfax,
whatever
or
all,
Wilk Street to, you know.
with the buy-in of the owners too. Remember,
Right.
this isn't, we're not heavy-handed here. Yes, we believe this should happen. We could put out a case to the property owner saying, here's why we think it's beneficial to you as property owners to go down this path. And here's what we're gonna expect of you to make that happen. Here's how we're gonna help you do it. But ultimately, we want to say what you do to your property. And I know that sounds horrible for people in West Virginia, but that is what this is all about. We're not looking to be Shepherdstown, but just some basic minimal protections to make sure that things don't go wrong. The Green Street School is a perfect example too. What happens to that school now? There's no say on anything. Even if you're
Let
in
it fall
zoning,
down.
you might have some say over what happens to the exterior of that school.
There's no change to the exterior of that school.
But there could be.
No, there couldn't be. I mean.
Why?
Well, that's what they've agreed to do. They've only agreed to remodel the inside. They've agreed
That's
not to
their
change
agreement.
it.
They can put up vinyl sides. There's no rule that says, oh, you can't make.
Okay, so you let the building fall apart, which is what it's doing now.
Or maybe
That's
find a
your-
buyer that's willing to go with those rules when the rules are there.
Well,
I'm not
But it's
saying
about
I wouldn't,
conversation.
Oh, it's a beautiful.
We're getting off track. We're getting off track.
They have to have some regulations. You have to
Right.
have regulations and you have to have requirements. So that anybody coming to you all, to the regulators can say, okay, Landmarks Commission, what do I need? What are your requirements for me remodeling the exterior
Right.
on my property? Tell me what your requirements are, because you have to have an objective standard. The law's very clear. You can't be ambiguous. You can't be discretionary. It's gonna have to have some objective standards. And one of the problems I have, not with you guys, but with some of these, like the Landmarks Commission in Jefferson County has ambiguous massing. What does that mean?
yeah, it's in
This,
here.
I know it's in there. I don't
It's in
understand.
here.
I had a couple of cases over there. A lady was trying to rebuild a house. She wanted to make it suited in Harper's Ferry, had to have a lawsuit. They lost, you know, we had to have a lawsuit. She was willing to build the house modeled after the other houses that were in the same century. It was one-story bungalow. She built this magnificent $1 million house that became, you know, perfect type, you know, 1790s. And they gave her an awful time. They wouldn't give her a building permit. So we had to go to the court to get one. So, I
All
mean,
I
it's
know
just, you
is
have to have some objective standards. So I don't know
Right.
what they are.
So could the town council, for example, pass ordinances, all right, we take this step. The Star Theater inquired whether or not they could use their facility for, what's the term? Showgirls, whatever, yeah. And we have an ordinance on the books that says, no, you can't have an exotic dance business in town. Could we pass an ordinance to protect the historic properties so that somebody can't tear down the country and build a Walmart?
we wrote
We
one of
do that
those
through
too.
ordinances, Dick. And
Well, the answer to that is yes and no. You can pass an ordinance that issues a certificate of appropriateness, but that doesn't say you can't tear down your building.
Right, we
So-
no,
wrote,
I'm not
so-
talking about certificates of, could the town council completely
Apart
setting
from-
aside that certificates of appropriateness, could we
So you
deal
can't-
with some of the issues that the Landmark Commission is justifiably concerned about and deal with those through ordinances?
Not outside the Historic Landmarks Commission statute.
All right,
Because there's nothing that I know of in the law that allows you, except if the building is a public nuisance, okay? It's falling down, it's dangerous,
all
then
right.
you, I did a couple ordinances on these dilapidated buildings that I sent to you all a couple years ago. I don't know if we ever adopted them or not.
Because we're working on the,
So, I mean, you know,
One
take
brought
care of dilapidated buildings and
it
stuff like
was-
that, that
yeah,
give you
it
the authority to do that and set up, you know, the process where if you had to recover the cost, or you go to court and get a
Right.
judgment for you.
and that's
I
what we're
worked a
working
long
on right
time on
now.
that. I sent you like a 12, 15,
Right.
17 page
17
letter.
page.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's, we're working on that now. I'm going by that. We've had,
So I mean, at least you can deal
So
with
the answer to my
dilapidated.
question is no.
right, right.
Dick, what is your biggest reservation or objection to the certificates of attendance? Appropriateness.
Without all due respect, I don't know anybody on it, and, you know, I'm not, this is not said, my biggest reservation is the town is in ceding control over the whole town as far as building repairs and all that stuff to a committee that's non-elected.
But appointed,
Well, but you're not elected. My
they're
objection is
appointed
that
by
you're
the
not
elected council.
Well, no, I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not arguing with you that it can't be done. He asked me what my objection is. That's my personal objection. If you tell me to do something and write one, like if you want to do it, I'll write it. Try to make it as legal as I can. But my personal objection, and I own an old building in town, which I've tried to keep up for the last almost 40 years, and it's a big one.
Yeah. And my main thing is I want everything to lie at the council's feet.
And I don't want
Decide
to change my
whether or
windows
not,
either.
you know, when you all bring it to us and say, okay, this is what we have talked to the homeowner about. And this is where we're at. And I want the council, because like I said, we're the ones sitting in this area that even though, you know, you're saying it's gonna take the heat off of you, I've been here long enough. It's not gonna take the heat off of me. I guarantee you my phone will blow up if somebody doesn't like what I do.
And so
And
I'm
I-
going back to a smaller area will
Right.
reduce some of
And
that
that's what I,
pain.
that's what I'm, you know, if we went back to a smaller area and maybe try, see how it works, but ultimately it would have to be us, you know, voting to do what needs to be done, not you just, not the landmark commission going in and saying, okay, this is what you need to do. Now, am I not,
And that's the question, that's how we wrote it, but that may be open to interpretation, whether or not the landmark commission can cede that responsibility back, but I'm sure that that could be
I
done.
mean, if we could come up with, you know, that and work where the council is the one that, you know,
There's a, you know, these ideas are great. I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying, and you
Right.
can, we can work something out on that. I think I can write something. But you have to remember that statutorily, a municipality and a county only have the powers that are granted to them by the legislature. Okay, they always have the legislature around saying you can do this or do not do that. And you have what's called plenary powers, which are very broad powers. And the municipal statute lists, I don't know, 50 or 60 things you can do. And you can, and then they passed this historic landmark commission statute to further authorize municipalities and counties to take a landmarks commission, so to try to keep the historical significance of our state relevant and allow you all to control that. That's that statute to do that. That statute gives the landmarks commission the same plenary power, that's what it says, to control repairs, maintenance, all those things. So I don't know that you can legally share power, but
right.
you probably could unless if somebody wanted to challenge it. I'll
Right.
write an ordinance to do that if you want to do it, but you have to keep that in mind that you only have the power they give you.
Right.
They get, the power they give you is to create a committee, a historic landmarks commission.
Right.
And that commission has a lot more power than a committee. Okay, the commission has the power to issue, you know, to control the repair, only on the exterior.
Right.
Architectural features.
Of
They
the-
can't come in and say, I don't like your sink, I don't
Right.
like this.
Right.
You know, I don't
Be
like
the
the color of your
outside
kitchen.
structure
It's the
itself.
outside structure that can be seen from a public place.
So Dick, is the
I have
idea
a
that the
question.
legislative intent with that was that they wanted that put in the hands of an independent body that wasn't,
It doesn't say that, it just
Yeah.
says they wanted to preserve the historical integrity of as much of the state as they could, without taking away private property owners' rights, and that's why they have that notice in there that either, and I agree with my friend back here, it's written ambiguously, whether the individual, I read it as, if you wanted to tell me I couldn't do something on my property, if you wanted to adopt this, I could object and be opted out, or 50% can, it's not clear. but they left that loophole, it's not a loophole, they reserved that right for the property owner. And still giving you all in the county or the counties and municipalities in the state the power to adopt, create this commission. But the commission itself, according to the statute, has this plenary power to regulate these
Right,
repairs,
just like we do.
all those things listed,
Right.
and even a building permit.
And
So
then-
you're ceding all that to them. I'm not, if you want to do that, that's fine, but you need to understand that.
Mr. Getty, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In your experience, because the law, you know, we're talking about this historic landmark code goes all this way. And we don't want to go that far. In your experience in the state of West Virginia, is that, I mean, the fact that we don't want to go all the way there, is that where the problem is? That, because we don't want to go all the way there. You know, we want to go some way. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Yeah, you only
know,
wanna
I
do
mean,
certain
It seems
things.
to me that if we didn't want to go, if we wanted to go farther, that's where we get ourselves into trouble. But if we don't want to go that far, that should be less onerous to folks. Is that an inaccurate?
Well,
Right.
no, that's correct, and you're right.
Okay.
You're-
It would be
you're
my
reading that
hope
right,
that West
yeah.
Virginia would say, oh, they don't want that much
Right,
control.
but the thing
But-
the thing I look back on
Once you
is,
give up
say something happens to you guys, say you have to move away for your job, and you got, then it gets replaced with somebody that says, we
You
want,
want it to be all
Right.
in.
then we've already done that, you know, there's no protection there to only go a quarter of the
But I think
way.
that's in the design guidelines.
I was just gonna
So we
say,
draft
design
it.
it the way you want.
Draft it that way.
But isn't the compromise in all of this, the election to be involved, included or not included? I mean,
Well, you
You
have
set
to
up
do
the
that to
rules.
set up your historic.
You've got to
district.
give notice to the property
Right,
owner or
that you're
their
doing the
occupant.
historical, right.
so that, I mean, the people who want to be included can be included, and those who don't can opt out. I mean, is
That's
that
the way
not
I
what
read
I'm
it.
hearing?
That's how I read it. I mean, like I
Well,
said, there's
then-
no judicial determination. on it.
Right.
It's probably
And
ambiguous.
we're probably looking at some type of an election to,
No, it's a notice. It's
or
not-
notice to create,
I mean, I guess
you
you
know,
could
the
do
historical district, small it down so
You,
it's
you
not.
already have an historical district
Right.
there. It's recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. What you don't have is you don't have the authority. You haven't authorized the committee. You
Right,
have a committee, but you haven't authorized them to issue a certificate of appropriateness. And that's the real
There are
issue.
Other things that they can do. There's a
There's
lot
other
of
things that they can do
get
short of
involved
that,
in.
yes.
right.
This is
Reasonably
one.
nice.
Yes, you can do a lot, they can do a lot. I mean, they've been doing it, obviously. They did a survey. I remember Jeannie came around and Barb, they were doing the survey of all the properties. So, I mean, there's a lot that's already been done.
And there's a lot of other things too,
And I
as
think,
I read it, that can be.
right, but I think also what they're trying to do is you using the Star Theater, they want to protect our structures that they can't come down. So we have to figure out, there's got to be some type of a rule that you just can't move in at nighttime and come in and take a bulldozer and take it to the
Well, that's a
ground.
demolition.
Yeah,
Like
and that's what I'm
that.
saying,
Yeah.
you know, and that's
We
what,
worked one out, remember, and then
Yes.
historic landmarks didn't like it. So
well,
that's
like I
back
said, I
to
think
that.
that's what we need to have a design, I guess we would call it, that eliminates anybody from, you know, making a rash decision in 30 seconds, deciding, well, I want to bring my building down.
The property,
Yeah, and we,
property owners covenant their property if they want it. I don't want my building ever torn down. It's a covenant.
Sure, they can,
property.
if they sell it, they can put that in the deed. I mean, but I doubt.
Personally, people can do that.
right,
And it doesn't help for you. Remember, this is for your neighbor. Everyone's gonna do the
Right.
right thing until their neighbor doesn't do the right
Right.
thing.
right, right.
It's gotta be
Anyway,
had.
the other issue.
Dick, hold on. Vince has been standing back there with his hand up for the
No,
past
that's-
hour.
I can't see mine.
You already done?
You're walking a razor's edge issue here. You know, I've been in town for 12 years now, and you've seen I've got a full commitment to our historic and preserving our historic. A great personal sacrifice to make sure that, you know, we save the buildings that we can. If this goes through in any direction, whether we make rules or not, we have a cache of historic materials, and we would like to create something that would help people who are under the weather financially, through all this and at all times, to help them, to do things that would best benefit our town, our historic district, and preserve our historic integrity of our buildings. Cindy wants to raise Bill Carriage house to the ground. And I said, no, you can't do this. So she gave me she gave me a price on it anyway, so.
So you're saying creating a fund that
No,
people can donate to?
A separate bunch of people that like to help financially
They could
and
do
with
that.
neighbors.
They could do that right now.
Don't need any
They
government
don't need
permission
anything
or
right
that.
now. You can
No.
create your
Right.
historic.
Greg?
Well, I've been saying about people tearing buildings down, which I guess Dr. Barron did that one time, right? So if you had building codes, they have to come and get a permit to
Right.
tear a building
And that's
down.
what,
And that would give them the opportunity to say, okay, wait a second, no. Or you guys to say, well, you gotta have a permit to do that.
Right.
Now,
Right.
if that star wanted to come down, they could do it.
and I understand that. That's why, we're working on the building codes to get that in so that we can have that to be enforceable the way it needs to be. I think Dick said when we begin this whole conversation, that's the first thing we need to do. Those building codes need to be in effect, and then we can start.
Then you have some teeth in the
Right,
whole.
we got some
in the whole
way to
situation.
keep people from doing it without coming to us and saying,
And that gives your building official, the code official, the right to go, okay, nope.
But didn't somebody also say that the establishing and working with the Landmark Commission wasn't contingent upon the building?
Correct. It is not,
But you
they
do
are
need a
not.
building, you don't have any building codes whatsoever.
right, we don't have anything right now.
But the only thing you can adopt is the state building code since
Right.
1990.
Okay.
So none of your ordinances
So
concerning
that's,
buildings or building permits or any of that stuff are valid.
Correct.
So the
And
only
Dick-
thing you can adopt is the state building code. And I think you wanted me to talk about that.
Yeah,
With that,
yeah,
I'll
we'll
just
get
talk
into
about
that in just,
for a
I
minute.
have one more question. And then-
Dick, correct me if I'm wrong, when you adopt the state building code, it's all or nothing, correct?
No, it's not. There are certain portions you don't have to
I
adopt.
think you have to adopt it all and then remove the ones I
No,
think
you
there's
just
3
don't
parts
know.
to it. I think there's 3 parts, and I think it says,
There's 11.
there's 3 major parts.
We'll get into it. Dick's got the information here. He's,
Like the moons in Saturn.
Well, it's got a lot, it's got a lot of parts, and that's part of the
Right.
problem. You don't have to adopt the Boca National Property Maintenance Code, because that interferes, that would be
That's the
worse
one.
than any, historic landmarks commission that ever existed. And if it were housed by evil people intent on making your life miserable and not being able to do anything.
right.
Not that these people are, that's not their, they're good people. But what I'm saying is that Boca, we wouldn't adopt that. You can
Right.
opt out for that. You don't have to put it in there. So here's how it works. The fire marshal is the one that promulgates these codes, and they're national codes. So in order for you to adopt it, you have to have a series of public hearings. You have to have a summary of the code sections that you're gonna adopt available for people to look at. The fire marshal, the state code of regulations say the fire marshal will come around and give lectures. Because you really do need to have 2 or 3 public meetings, so the people in this community will know what's being adopted. And he can bring along the Boca code, plumbing, heating. You're not gonna publish all that.
Right.
You're gonna say, this is what we're gonna adopt, and have him come and explain it, and you can have the ordinance that you're gonna adopt. It has to be published in the paper, it has to be available for inspection, and you have to have 2 readings. But before you do that, you need to have the fire marshal come along and explain it to people and why it's important.
Okay, so we need,
You're gonna, first of all, you have to have some resolution saying,
right,
we're gonna do a study or undertake to adopt the state building code, and we wanna have public meetings and somebody needs to contact the fire marshal or his assistant and
have
ask
them
them
come
how
in.
they've done it everywhere else. I mean,
Right.
this is not, we're not inventing the wheel here, folks. Don't we belong to the municipal league? What the hell good are they?
You have to attend, you have to be active, and
You have to pay your dues.
Well, we've been paying our dues.
Yes,
When you
yes.
paid your dues,
And
it's
they-
like the county commission, you know?
Yep.
They belong, they have, I mean, you call them up and say, hey, we want to adopt the state building code. How's everybody else done it? Give us some information. And then call the state fire marshal because they'd like for you to adopt it.
Right.
And we have a uniform code all over the state.
Now, what you gave us the other day, that I gave council, was the code with your recommendation of certain things.
Well, I
to-
recommend you do not include that
Right.
Boca code.
I
yeah, that,
I sent
Building
this
maintenance,
on
because
to-
it's just onerous. I read
Yeah.
that.
I sent this on to, our dilapidated building agency,
Okay.
the mayor has it, and Randy Watson and Jeff Gold.
Yeah, get their input, because they're engineers.
They're engineers.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer. I mean,
Jeff.
Look at it and
Yeah,
see if there are
dealt with
other
a lot of
things.
building codes over the years, but I'm not an engineer, and I always had to have engineers or architects.
Before we
somebody-
jump on to the building code, I think these guys from the Landmark Commission are here to see if we as a council are willing to work with them and work something through that's workable and
I think-
acceptable for everybody.
I think we can work something out. We just gotta get all our ducks in a row and make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody knows exactly what is gonna transpire so that we can answer to our constituents out here. Because ultimately, we gotta answer to, you know, so they need to know exactly what we're doing. So I think, you know, we really need to sit down, get on the same page together. I think it's doable in a way that we can make it work for everybody. People gotta give and take a little bit. And, you know, like I said, we're not gonna get everything we want, but maybe we can work something out. I mean, hopefully the Historical Landmarks Commission would be willing to sit down. We can work through this and as adults and get it put out on the table. And then once that's done, we'll take it to Dick and have him review it, make sure everything's cool, whatever we come up with, and go from there. But we also need to be able to get our state building codes done, and that's gotta be done. I've given
You can do both. I mean,
right,
Yeah.
start on the state building code
Right.
and work on this one too.
right, so
So the next meeting is March 23rd at 5 o'clock here for the.
for the Landmark
For the
Commission,
Landmark Commission, right,
I'll tell
guys?
you, here's what I would suggest to council, and particularly those maybe who have not read the design guidelines and the two ordinances. Really read them. I remember a couple years ago, Chris Chapman, bless his heart, sat up here and read an entire pamphlet line by line to see if people had comments, understood it, didn't understand it, hated it, whatever they had to say. Bless his heart, he did that. I think we as a council really need to understand everything. What is massing, what is siding, what is fenestration, what is spacing between buildings, what is height, all these things. I don't know that they know none of this stuff, but these are all what we're saying, that yes, we are in agreements in putting these regulations on property owners in the town of Bath, or in the district. Just so, I really think, I don't know how much we truly understand about what it is we're talking about. We
So the
don't
one-
not
hasn't
understand
the
it.
land-
We can get to that point, we put a proposal for
Right.
what we wanna do, and
Right.
then we have that kind of public hearing that then goes wind up.
Absolutely.
So that's what we did with the plan.
and that's what we need to do. We need to go and sit down and go through this line by line so everybody understands, because I understand better now, but I'm still not grasping the whole thing. And I'm sorry. It's, so I've got to meet with you guys so that I can get your view in a meeting like we've had here tonight, and we can work something out. But we need to be, all of us here that's sitting at the council needs to be informed of what we're doing, and then you all need to be informed on what we can do. So,
Respectful in there, if I may. I fully expected to come to this meeting tonight and to have council all have read this by now, because we've worked on it for as long as I've been on Landmark Commission, which has been 3 years.
Why don't you ask what the
And-
questions are?
if you don't like, now, I haven't had time to sit down and read it all, and I
Exactly, sir.
apologize.
I sent this
Respectfully,
3
sir, I'm
times
just
in the
saying,
last
here's
month.
what I'm trying to say, please. What I'd like to see is, let's schedule something then. That's what we
do
expected
it on
to
the
see
23rd.
tonight.
Or we can do another date, just not the next week, the
Their next
17th.
But I
meeting,
think
their
there needs
next
to
meeting.
be, instead of let's do this, let's do it. And I know we're all
Let's
busy.
set a meeting, we
and
can
I
set it
know-
right
I think
now.
what needs to happen, it needs to be a work session that we start and come out with a
Thank you.
product that
Thank you,
everybody can do
yes.
it.
And
Let's
that's,
pick a date.
So before we
We
did that,
do.
I was gonna say, Rose is already on that. I
Thank
attended
you,
the
Rose,
last one. I
yes.
plan on attending any more Landmark Commission meetings as
Thank
well.
The
So
next
let's
one's on the
start.
23rd.
let's start over and get something that we can all grasp. If we're not waiting for the building code, we can move.
And
Yeah,
start
I
working-
think the council needs to be obligated to write down what they want as opposed to what the
But if we're all at
landlord
the
says.
same meeting, we don't have to write down what they want. We can all tell each other. And
Well,
agree to
yeah.
disagree.
Could've
Come up with something that we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for moving forward. We just need to get on the same page and like you said, I'm a little bit, trying to digest everything. I mean, just like this building code. I'm a construction guy and I don't understand half the building codes in it. So, I mean, I need to be able to understand it so I'm comfortable.
But before we get too far down this path, I think the HLC wants some sort of feeling, and you don't have to give it tonight, but this is the direction you all want to go, that we want to eventually go to the owners and occupants of this shrink down district to get their buy-in, because I do not want to put all of us through the pain and suffering of doing all this if the ultimate decision from you all is, geez, we don't want to do it. And that's fine. That is perfectly acceptable.
Right
But-
at this point, I mean, I think we could come down to a point where we all can agree on some points and we may not agree on every point. There may
And
be.
our starting position, which we've already scaled way back when we put this forward, when we do this with Larry Lauer, is in what we've provided several times to you all. So that's the starting point of where we're coming from.
And that's what I wanted to read and really try to understand. Look it up in the, if you see a word you don't understand, look it
Well, I
up.
got to pull
Try to
what they
understand
originally
it.
wrote,
Because
when
Wait a
Larry
minute,
was here,
it's
those
what?
ordinance that you guys wrote when Larry was here, those are the ones that,
Correct, and I've sent them,
Right.
I'll resend them again after this meeting, so everyone's on the same page. This is where it's
those
at,
are
it's
the,
fresh
those
in
are
your
the
file.
ones that will start off and we'll go point by point.
But please, if we're gonna go on the 23rd, since we're gonna give up our meeting for that, is please come, and I've already read them, so we're not starting from scratch with everything. Come with questions, just, they're not that long, so we can make the most of our
Right.
time.
Council agree with that?
And with your objection.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, we need to meet like, where we can sit around the table and talk. This is too much.
Right.
This and that.
So,
I don't know where there's a big, and I don't even think that room's not big enough.
Do you all have any more questions for
no,
me?
yeah. Thank you, Dick. Unless somebody else has any questions for Dick.
I have one question about the building code that I'm not sure of.
The state building code?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of enforcing that kinds of things, do you need a certified building inspector or is an engineer capable of fulfilling that role? I've asked that for 3 years and I still don't know the.
The engineer can do it if he's registered with the fire commission.
I think you have to, that's why the fire, I'm not sure.
I asked him the other day, I said, if code official is an engineer, is he allowed to be doing any code inspections? He said, if he's registered with us, he's fine.
Or a state.
Certified by the
code,
fire commission.
Or a code enforcement agent.
I don't know, I don't know the answer to that.
I talked to him the other day.
He may be right. So
I talked
that's
to him the
why
other
you
day.
guys need to have the fire marshal to come up and explain
Yes,
to you.
and they will do that.
And they will do that free. They're not gonna charge you anything, and the public can be invited so they can understand it too.
Right.
So you all can learn at the same time.
That's public service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be a big shock for this community to have a building.
The other question I have concerns, I lost my track of thought. Go ahead, move on, it'll come back.
Okay, I'm trying to distill this into.
So you are
something
with me, I mean, I'll stay as long as you like. If you
Yeah.
have any questions, just, somebody send me an
Because the
email.
building permit, we're pretty much done with this with your recommendation. We just need to retype it. We'll wait and see what Randy Watson and Jeff Gola suggest
All right.
and take out or put in
Send
whatever
that
they
back to me.
think
again, let me
and
make
then
sure I
send
look
it back to you. How's that sound?
And who's gonna issue the permit? Who's gonna issue a building permit?
at it. The town.
I'm sorry,
The town,
who in the town?
Police department always has.
say we've been doing it all along. It's just,
Well,
our attorney just said,
the state says it has to be the code official.
I'm sorry about the state. I'm sorry, but this little town can't absorb all this major catastrophe. And they'll just have to take me to jail.
You don't go to jail for that, yes.
Oh, well, you're here, so you'll
I'll
take care
keep,
of it.
yeah.
Uh, Like I said, I mean, the thing about it is, this town can't absorb all this at one time. We gotta take baby steps. If we adopt the state code, it'll be issued through the way it's been done.
Right.
And if they come and slap my fingers, they can come slap them all they want.
But you can't adopt a code and then just say, no, we're not gonna do that part. That's like saying to the police, well, you can have speed limits, but I really don't wanna do it.
All right, we're off topic. We can't.
You do a name.
Yep.
Thank you.
See you
very much.
later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Remember what my
Appreciate you
question
coming.
was. We talked about, go through this process, you're gonna have all this expenditure of registered mail going out.
They don't wanna
Do you guys have a budget or would that be a town thing? That's just my question.
It says the commission shall.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we gotta take baby steps.
We
Maybe
can-
down
that all
the
has to be
line,
part
of the process.
you know, we can get somebody hired full-time in here to take care of building.
You don't have to
You
have
know,
somebody all the time.
You can't absorb it. We don't have the
Alright.
money to do it right now. You don't understand. This is a big step for this community. And we gotta do one thing at a time. And if the state fire marshal don't agree with it, Barb, then they don't agree with it. But I gotta do what I gotta do. I can't afford to hire a full-time or a part-time enforcement code guy. You know, we just, right now, I mean, we just came off Corona year, and we've got to do what we can do to make things work. And I understand where you're coming from. The state fire marshal says that they're to be in charge, and there's to be, but unless this council finds money somewhere to do it, we don't have it.
Well, I'm concerned about the town's liability of issuing permits when nobody's inspecting,
It
nobody's
lays right here.
certified, nobody's qualified.
I understand, but you gotta understand, you gotta give us time to get this all together so we can get it straightened out so that we can financially do it.
So what kind of documentation is somebody gonna have to present to have a building permit? You know, I put an addition on my house in the county. And they wanted a stick drawing on 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Now, you go to Washington County, yes, expensive, but you have to have stamped drawings from an
Yeah, when I
architect.
go to
or
Berkeley
engineer.
County, it's expensive. You know, Washington County and
So
Berkeley.
why did you move here? Why, if you want these regulations,
No,
I mean, I'm
that's
not
not
saying.
what
you
he's
don't
saying.
want to have
That's not what he's saying.
And the other side of the coin, so you've adopted a building code, but you don't have anybody, what's the presentation to get this permit? And it then has to go through somebody who can inspect those documents that are gonna be required for that building permit.
I don't have any answers for you because we don't have the money.
And I
I'm
mean,
just
just
telling you.
to say, I mean,
You
just a few
know,
moments
I
ago,
mean, you
you
all
read the
want-
building codes and don't understand them. So
I
obviously,
understand that.
So
And
obviously-
half your inspectors out there don't understand them either. I will tell you.
well, I've been in the trades,
You know,
I understand
so
that part.
what I'm trying to say is we have to, as this community and as this town, we have to take baby steps. You're talking about something that has never been done in this community other than the regulations that was on paper when I came here as a council member until the state got rid of the building codes. You know, voided our building codes. This is a big step for this community because,
Your
you know,
building permit or your building code?
the building codes,
They took everything.
they took everything because they told us we have to pass
This is what you're.
and this is what we gotta do. Well, you can't ask a little municipality to try to conform to what's going on in Charleston or anywhere else. I mean, it's tough. You gotta understand, there are a lot of people that live in this community. There are a lot of people that live in this community that don't know when the next meal's coming. And I don't wanna throw all this stuff on top of it and get them upset to the point where they're just gonna, I don't know what to do.
But I think from the other end, what Tim is saying, well, those of us that live in the county, we're paying money for a building permit. And we're not getting anything in return. They're still taking our money. They're still issuing us a building permit. So why does the town need to go now? Not saying they shouldn't, but where there's some break here, because if you all were essentially shut down from issuing building permits, then why is Morgan County still issuing building permits?
I don't know.
Taking my
They
money.
have, they adopted building code.
But they don't, but there's no inspection.
I can't,
No one comes
I
out.
can't answer for the county commission. You'll have to- like I said, I just know right now that this is a lot for these people in this community to digest. You all come from places that have had
Let's
The
not
building.
generalize, Scott.
The building
Some of
permits,
you.
and you've had some type of building permits, whereas,
No, I've been in Morgan County. There's
Right.
no building. I pay $10 and they,
Right.
like you said, we bring in a piece of paper, it's this big, and they issue me a building permit.
And
No
I'll
one ever
tell you-
comes out to look.
yeah, and I can't answer for them. I can't, but like I said, I know that I gotta figure out how to make this whole thing work. And I know what Barb's saying, I understand what Barb's saying, but we also have to take baby steps to get this all implemented. And I think everybody on council would say probably the same thing. We gotta do it step by step so everybody understands where we're going with this whole thing. You know, the state is requiring us to adopt these building codes, and it's gonna happen. Already told the ordinance committee I want it done by the end of May and in the books, and then we'll go to the next step. If we gotta get a code enforcer, we have to pay for them, then we'll figure out where we're gonna get that, and we're gonna go down that route. But we gotta implement things little by little.
Well, you're not gonna like what I have to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. 3 years ago, you asked Greg to get certified as a building code inspector. He did.
He did that on his own.
He did it on his own
Right.
because you wanted to,
Like I
but he
said
did it
that-
on his own. He paid his own money. He got certified. And what did he say to you? He said, I'll be your building code inspector, and the only thing the town has to do is pay for my continuing education.
I understand that.
And you wouldn't do it.
That's right. I wouldn't.
So now that's passed, and I will throw myself in front of his car if he ever agrees to do that again.
Or we can argue this all day.
I'm not arguing,
know,
I'm just
I'm
saying
just
that was
telling
my
you-
statement.
I'm not
All
gonna.
right, well, let's go
ahead and
let me do my recorder thing here. Okay, what I understood from all that, from the past hour and a half, was I kind of got a common consent that council will attend the next Historic Landmark Commission meeting on March the 23rd at
And-
5 p.m.
And be
5:30.
prepared,
Am I,
and be
5:30.
prepared to have a discussion. So read the material that needs to be read so that we're not wasting the landmarks commission
First
time.
step we need to decide is what we're gonna identify as the historical district. Take 15 minutes.
Right, and
well,
that can
then
be discussed in the
will have to be
meeting.
changed. That big document that Dick brought in.
No,
would
it
have to
doesn't.
be changed.
Don't-
So that-
Those are two separate things.
You're
Don't,
right, they are.
that is no bearing. All we're saying is that's where we would probably choose from as the starting point, but
Correct.
separate those two things.
Right,
I mean, you can come with a clean slate in your head and say, if I was, what part of this town do I think deserves extra protection that the rest of the town doesn't get? Whether or not it lines up with the current boundaries or not, does not matter. And from my point of view is what's the economic drivers? What are the things that people see when they come? And we can still go down the path of extending the
right.
overall historic district. And maybe at some point, 10, 15, 20 years from now, the whole thing will be
Move it
that way.
over,
But let's
yeah.
start with something
That we can manage.
that work with, that we have people that are willing to participate and are on board with that.
That we can manage, that start out with, so I think that's the best thing to do. I don't know if you've got my email address, but will you, email those?
Sharon, can I just send them?
Yeah, send it over, she can send it, I'm
Make
sorry.
sure.
Is it
Uh,
this stuff? Is it this, the guidelines? and
No,
all
it's
these
what they
proposed?
came up with.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that it there?
But we'll send everyone,
I have it.
I probably got it, but.
Okay.
All right,
The ice house.
Tony, you wanna add anything?
The ice house has a room that has
No, you don't want me
tables
to.
Let's
and
do that.
shade that we use a lot for meetings.
okay,
At the ice house.
yeah,
The
we
ice
could do
house.
that,
We'll just
that
have to
way
check
everybody
with
can
them and-
spread out, we can,
Hopefully still
you
good.
know,
March the 23rd.
23rd,
5:30 ice house.
5:30 Ice House.
I mean,
Thank you.
Jenna, we can check.
5:30.
And if you would,
Jenna,
just
Yeah.
let,
Thanks, Laura.
just let Sharon know so she can put it out to all the council members. I would appreciate all the council members attending, unless you have an emergency.
5:30.
All right,
5:30?
5:30.
I feel we just need to have something in place to protect this
Right.
structures here and this place.
Okay, that sounds good to me, so let's do it. All right, anything else?
Jenna, thank you.
Move we adjourn.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, Rose.